time for the best coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
Indeed it does on a Monday, and great to have you with us all across America and Canada. Thanks for being with us. A lot to do over the next 60 minutes. It's so nice to be home, back in our Las Vegas studios after a week and a half away, traveling on the East Coast. We appreciate you guys putting up with us, or putting up with me while we were traveling on the East Coast. And we say hello to for the first time today to our friend Sam Yarnell's hanging out with us. Boy, what a Sunday we had in sports, Sam. We'll get into the U.S. Open coming up in 10 minutes. A big trade in the NBA, along with the NBA Finals in Game 5 between the Pacers and Thunder coming up tonight. I got NASCAR to talk about later on in the show. But we start things out in Major League Baseball, where we got a blockbuster trade well short of the trade deadline. And I'd like to say I'm shocked, but given the trajectory of this story, and I know the Red Sox are playing better baseball right now, and some will say, how could you make a deal like this when you're actually starting to play well? You're back over 500. You've kicked the crap out of the Yankees for the last couple of weeks. What would make you go and do this sort of thing? But they get out from under an enormous contract in Rafael Devers. I know he's a great player, but there was obviously, these two sides were at loggerheads. He wasn't going to play first base. He was mad about Bregman taking his job at third base. When you reach that level of discontent, I don't know if there's any putting it back together. And as much as people are going to want to crush the Red Sox, and I get that impulse, only they know what was going on inside that clubhouse over the last couple of months with Rafael Devers before they make this deal. So in some way, shape, or form, I have to give them the benefit of the doubt here.
Yeah, so shocking, to say the least, head-scratching, perplexing, for a plethora of reasons that you just laid out, Jason. I mean, what I'll get to in a second is this is probably the end of Craig Breslow, a very short-lived tenure as an executive for the Boston Red Sox. This is something that you can't do the way that he did it. And I, weirdly enough, I actually feel like I can relate to Red Sox fans to an extent this morning, but I can also, I can empathize with them and sympathize with them, because I've been in that spot where your team trades face of the franchise, top 10 hitter in baseball, unquestionably, regardless of the contract. No one cares if it's going to be underwater in 5 years, because right now he's going to be a top 10 hitter in baseball, has been for the last, 3 years, and probably will be for the next 5 years, right? If all things remain consistent, as they never do in baseball. Here's the thing. When you trade away a player like that, you are going to get unrest within the fan base. That guy is the Nico Harrison of the NBA now. Fans are going to call for his job the rest of the season, as they deserve to, and he probably should not continue after the rest of this year if you look at, the guy's short tenure as the Red Sox general manager. But when you do something like that, Craig Breslow, the ultimate important thing to get in return is either players that have had short-term success at the major league level and potentially don't have that high of a ceiling, or players who are incredibly young and have an infinitely high ceiling, as you see just about every time a face of a franchise is traded. What you can't go out and do is get a guy with a 6.5 ERA, a guy with a 4.5 ERA, and two nobodies, which is exactly what Craig Breslow did. This is going to go down as one of the all-time bad trades in Red Sox history. Obviously, nothing's ever going to touch the famous Babe Ruth trade. That's the worst trade in the history of baseball, and it's not even close. But this is going to be a very modern, not equivalent. Again, nothing's ever going to be close. But this is going to be a modern example of that. They gave away the face of the franchise for a couple of lucky beans.
I am interested to see what what these guys they got in return do. Hicks, obviously, Harrison. Hicks has had all sorts of issues here since landing in San Francisco. They moved him out.
He's also on his third team now as a prospect.
I know. But the Red Sox.
Kyle Harrison has been good, though. He's had flashes. I will give them that.
Yes.
They got one guy who might be good.
Yep. And, you get a couple of minor leaguers. You get a prospect in Tibbs. And look, like I said, much like I'll say about the Luka Doncic deal, unless you are on the inside of these things, you don't know how toxic of an environment for them to have made a decision to cut ties from a guy who is as talented as Rafael Devers. That situation must have been so toxic. Or maybe it was John Henry saying, "Look, I want to save money." I mean, that's an enormous amount of money that you've just taken off the books. You know, if you're the Red Sox and you got rid of a headache. Now, you know, as far as Breslow's concerned, it's going to be dictated on what happens the rest of the way. The Red Sox are playing much better baseball right now than they were a month ago. And
if they make the playoffs,
if they are a wild card team or better, he's still going to wind up keeping that job. As will Alex Cora. You know, but it was a surprising move until I really stepped back and said, though, and again, the haul they got back in return was not what I think you should be getting for somebody like a Rafi Devers. I mean, look at Juan Soto. You know, look at what the Nationals got for Juan Soto. Now, again, he's not as young as Juan Soto.
And he's got an actual contract ahead of him.
Right.
That is all fine and well. But there are so many, like, you can't do that. You can't make this move after you beat the team, you sweep the team that's leading the division and hold the best hitter on the planet to 1 for 12 and make his average drop 20 points in a single series. You can't do that right now when your team is playing the best baseball they have all season. You can't do that right now when you have 2 of the top 5 prospects in baseball on your 26-man roster, and now they have no lineup protection. It makes no sense from a Boston Red Sox standpoint. The move makes sense 100%. The time when they did it, none at all. I don't get it. It's a head scratcher. I can't get behind it. And like you said, the Red Sox have to play October baseball if Craig Breslow wants any shot to be the general manager next year.
The timing is strange. There's no, I mean,
or
there's
the Pobo or whatever he is.
Yeah, the timing is strange. There's no getting around it. And you wonder if there's other moves to come now for the Red Sox. You know, given what they've done here, there's obviously an urgency to win this season with this team. I wonder if there's a corresponding move that they've got sort of lined up in their head as it relates to the rest of the season. They've also been pitching better lately. So to go make a move for a couple of pitchers when you've actually been pitching better lately, that's kind of strange too. We got to talk about the U.S. Open, Sam. What a wild final round at Oakmont. We'll get into it next. We proceed on this Monday edition of Sports Wrap to do the golf. I was sitting in a airplane at 30,000 feet watching the final round of the U.S. Open. So I couldn't let out the audible oohs and ahs that I would if I were sitting in front of my TV as I was watching it, Sam Yarnell. But J.J. Spaun, he's your winner of the 125th U.S. Open at Oakmont, and in dramatic fashion, he did it with a make on the 72nd hole, a make for the ages, really. 62 feet, something like that, over 60 feet. It was the longest putt of the week, Sam. And something I want to ask, something I'm going to ask Ryan Ballingy of Golf News Net later in the show, and I'll ask this of you. Is J.J. Spaun more likely Lucas Glover, U.S. Open winner who never really does all that much again in his career? Or is this the launch of J.J. Spaun, who, you know, played Rory McIlroy basically to a draw at the Players' Championship? Like, what is J.J. Spaun? Is this just this once-in-a-lifetime feel-good story, you know, sort of journeyman golfer who wins the U.S. Open? You know, is it as much about the rest of the field just wilting under the conditions at Oakmont coming out of the rain delay, where I think Spaun came out and McIntyre came out, and those guys played just a different level of golf coming out of the weather delay than the rest of the field, which just fell apart. Sorry, Sam Burns. I mean, what do you make of what we saw from J.J. Spaun, and sort of does this spawn pun intended, more wins for him.
Yeah, 65 feet 4 inches. It
There
was
you
the
go.
longest putt any player made this entire
Yep.
weekend,
Yep.
and it was on the 72nd hole for the winner. How crazy is that?
It's crazy.
I'll take the cop out answer. It's too soon to tell. But that's just because, the guy's had a good month, right? Not everyone, but a lot of golfers can have a good month. I don't know if he can parlay that into 3 good months or a good year. And I think if he, can put together 2 more top tens, then we could start to have the conversation of, has JJ Spaun arrived? Is this really who he is?
I think he's Lucas Glover. I think he's Lucas. I think he's more likely Lucas Glover.
Oakmont is interesting, though, because look at the people who have won there. They've maintained somewhat tour success post winning a U.S. Open at Oakmont. That's not to say that it's the end-all be-all, and there are people in the golf community saying that who are behind the whole JJ Spaun is the next guy. I'm not going to get to that point. But I will say, anytime you win an event that the golf event that the governing body openly says we want nobody to finish under par, and you win that event under par, it is impressive around the sport of golf, Jason. So I'm not ready to say he's Lucas Glover. I'm also not ready to say that he's, the next Brooks Koepka or Bryson DeChambeau, who come off of a U.S. Open win, who Bryson DeChambeau came off of a U.S. Open win last year and parlayed it into what? Five straight tournaments of success.
You shoot a 40 on the front 9. And you win. I mean, it's insane. The roller coaster ride that this guy took us on Sunday and even Saturday to some degree. I mean, it was amazing to watch. He definitely grasped the concept of U.S. Open golf, of USGA, U.S. Open golf, of just scrambling and grinding and making pars. There was a point in this tournament where he made like 15 straight pars. That's how you win at the U.S. Open, is by making pars. It's the equivalent in bowling, in tournament bowling. They always say it's not about making strikes, it's about making your spares. That's what it is in U.S. Open golf. It's just about figuring out ways to grind out pars. And when the rest of the field was wilting, and boy did they wilt, Sam Burns. I will keep pointing to you, Sam Burns, who got a terrible ruling, by the way.
I was common sense. Look,
common sense has to rule in that, and I know people are going to say, well, there wasn't water splashing up when he stood there, and it has to do a certain thing. This is where golf loses me. This is where golf loses the average sports fan, because common sense has to prevail in that situation. And as a rules official, you got to look at this and be able to say, to some level, there has to be some degree of subjectivity, and look at this and say, there's no way he should be playing out of this spot. That being said, you have to be mentally tough enough to then figure out how to get through that moment and then get through the last few holes. There's a lot of golfers that are going to be kicking themselves as they wake up on Monday morning, Sam, going, man, I really had a shot to win this thing. Adam Scott out of the weather delay struggled. Other than McIntyre and Spaun, everybody struggled coming out of that weather delay, Sam.
I do think that there's an element of the U.S. Open at Oakmont, though, when they have these tournaments, that if you're a golfer, right, not those of us who are trying to assess the golfers, but if you are a professional golfer, you've got to kind of write it off. Like, it has to be the most shakeable tournament that you play for exactly what you're saying, Jason. Like, there are guys who are just going to come out and, throw a dud. That's fine. Yep. Like, it happens sometimes. It just doesn't work out. It's not your Thursday and Friday and you miss the cut. Being able to shake it is what's so much more important, especially when you have so many notable guys missing the cut.
Yeah.
Watching the Travelers next week at a place where scoring should be up.
Oh, God.
Let's hope, right, that this isn't getting in the heads of too many of these golfers, because it's a very dangerous game we've played.
Well, there's a reason why they make the Travelers so easy for these guys coming off the U.S. Open every year, and somebody will win that event with 26 or 27 under, as they do every year. I've played that course many times, and even I score pretty well there, which tells you a lot about the ease of that course. By the way, Wyndham Clark should never be allowed at Oakmont again. If I was Oakmont, I would not allow Wyndham Clark ever to step foot in that golf course again. I don't care what event is there. I don't care if it's, the local tourney there. He should never be allowed in that course again for his behavior and the way he conducted himself. Go and look it up online if you haven't seen it. The pictures of the damaged lockers reportedly at his hands. He should never be allowed there again. And the PGA Tour, not only should they fine and suspend him, they should make it public. Stop letting these guys hide behind you when they act like idiots on the golf course, Sam. Real quick.
I don't know. Like, we don't get that mad when David Ortiz takes a phone to or takes a bat to a bullpen phone.
But the golf is a gentleman's sport. You're not supposed to behave that way. That's terrible. I don't know. We're coming back. We got some NBA to get to. Somehow the Magic making a big deal. Coming up in 10 minutes, Ryan Ballingy helps me break down the madness at the U.S. Open in the final round. Get some thoughts with him from Golf News Net. But Sammy Arnell, Game 5 of the NBA Finals. I wonder if the odds makers still think we're going 6 when it comes to the Thunder and the Pacers. I haven't looked at the latest odds. I've been going crazy since we got back from New York last night. Back at our Las Vegas studios. Thrilled to be back home in Sin City. I want to talk about this NBA trade, but let's start with the NBA Finals, Sam. And look, the Thunder figure out a way, in Game 4. We have a Game 5 on Monday night, but, the Thunder figure out a way in Game 4 to get up off the mat late in that game and get this thing back to Oklahoma City, tied at 2 games apiece with these two teams. And it should be interesting to see what transpires here in Game 5 coming off a Game 4 that if the Pacers lose this series, they're certainly going to rue what transpired late in Game 4.
Definitely, no question. But I'm not ready to write the Pacers off in this series.
Or should you?
And I know the favored price, by the way, right now, plus 102 for the Thunder to win 4-2. So the book thinks the Thunder are going to come out and win 2 straight on their home floor. I don't know if I do. I know that this is a Pacers team that I believe still hasn't lost back-to-back games in the postseason. I think the last time they lost back-to-back games was like February or March or something. Now, this is a Thunder team that's a lot better at home than they are on the road, but that's not to say that they're great at home. They're just really bad on the road. I don't know, man.
I think it's going 7, Sam. I think it's going 7 at this point.
I think they're going to split the next 2, and I think the Pacers, honestly, Jason, as wild as it is, I think the Pacers win tonight, and I think the Thunder win the next game. As backwards as you would think that is, I think it goes Pacers, Thunder, and I mean, Pacers haven't lost back-to-back games all postseason, Jason. I think the Indiana Pacers might actually pull this thing out.
Yeah, I don't know if they do. I think they're going to come up just a little short, but I've been very impressed, and I think we have undersold them all year long. I think a lot of us thought that the Thunder were just going to breeze through this series, and that hasn't been the case. Other than Game 2, the bounce back game off of Game 1, where they win by a big number. I've been very impressed with what the Pacers have been able to do in this series, and it kind of leaves you wondering, how is this only a 4 seed in the East? Did they simply underachieve throughout the regular season? Because they are playing a 68-win team, a team that's won over 80 games between regular season and postseason. And they've basically played them to a draw here through the first 4 games, which does make you kind of wonder, how are they not better during the regular season? Just a question.
Well, I mean, it's not the same at all, but we wondered the same thing about the Boston Celtics. Now, I get it. They played a much longer season last year than the Indiana Pacers did. But that said, I think there is something to not going 100%, but saving yourself for the playoffs, picking your spots in the NBA. And like, Look at the last decade in NBA history. That is the basis around this whole, what is it called? The load management.
Yeah.
That's the entire basis for it, is that the Spurs, more than 10 years ago, gosh, I'm getting old, 15 years ago, the Spurs would play Kawhi Leonard for half the season, and then he'd be like the best sixth man ever in the playoffs, and he'd win them championships. So I think it's just a natural progression of basketball. Unfortunately, one team 15 years ago figured out it was super effective, and now everybody does it. And unfortunately for basketball as a sport, it's still pretty effective.
Let's talk about the big trade that took place and certainly had a lot of us talking. And that was the one that sends, and look, of all the things we saw on Sunday in a shocking day of sports news, what we saw this weekend with the Grizzlies trading Desmond Bane to the Magic for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Cole Anthony, 4 unprotected first-round picks, and 1 first-round pick swap Sunday. If they weren't already mad in Dallas over the Luka Doncic deal, if the fan base weren't already mad, they're looking at this going, wait a minute. How on earth are you getting all of that for Desmond freaking Bane? And we got 1 draft pick for Luka Doncic. Again, I know it all worked out because Nico Harrison's going to get, Cooper Flag. But man alive, fans in Dallas have to be going, I just don't understand.
This is like, it was the weekend of GMs just deciding, hey, we're all going to go crazy. Doesn't matter what sport we work in. Bad trades are just going everywhere. It's like the stock market right before it crashed back in the 20s. Everyone was just trying to sell anything at any price. The Grizzlies have now found themselves at a critical juncture in their franchise's history. I'm not even going to address the Magic. They got absolutely hosed in this trade, and that's a franchise-altering trade for the Magic in the worst way possible. They may have kissed away contention for the next however long, as long as they traded away all their first-round picks. Now, the Grizzlies have a very important decision to make for the future of their franchise, right? Because Desmond Bane was like one of their little 3, right? You got Jaren Jackson Jr., you got Ja Morant, and you had Desmond Bane. So now Desmond Bane's gone. Are you going to extend Ja Morant this offseason when you have an opportunity to offer him an extension? Or is it time to move on from him? Are you going to really commit to Jaren Jackson Jr. being a cornerstone of your franchise and pay him? Or is it time to move on from him? The Grizzlies over the next 2 months, I am very interested to see as to whether they go for a complete tank or use these 4 first-round picks to actually make themselves a real viable contender. I think both outcomes are completely plausible. I'm fascinated to see where we end up with that franchise.
I'm hoping Cole Anthony gets an opportunity as well because I did not like the way they treated him in Orlando. I think he is far more talented and should have gotten far more run. I still think there's a lot of upside in Cole Anthony's career. I hope he gets an opportunity to shine in Memphis. And look, you add Desmond Bane to a core of Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner, and Jalen Suggs. That thing in Orlando starts to look a lot more impressive. But you did give up a lot. You gave up a lot to make it happen. I think if you're the Grizzlies, you're feeling pretty good about yourselves in terms of what you got in return. All right, Ryan Ballingy talks golf with us next. Good to have you with us on this Monday edition of the show. Good to be back at our Vegas studios, and good to be talking to this guy. And if it's major golf season, we're always talking to Ryan Ballingy. Does a great job, Golf News Net. Hanging out with us after a while. I watched the entire final round of that U.S. Open on a JetBlue flight, cross country from New York to Vegas. And it was the only saving grace on an otherwise horrible flight. Not because of JetBlue, just it was a bumpy flight. But boy, talk about bumpy. That final round. You get a golf course that plays one way essentially for 62 or 63 holes, Ryan. And you're prepared for that, and that's what you prepare for all week. And then the rains came, and it completely changed that course from the perspective of these guys they didn't know what to do, with the exception of J.J. Spaun and McIntyre. I mean, these guys were just looking for answers.
Yeah, it became a completely different test, and almost the polar opposite in some ways. Even though Oakmont was still pretty fast, the greens were still pretty tricky. They were tricky for a different reason, but predicting ball flight out of wet surfaces, I don't care if it's short grass, I don't care if it's rough, I don't care if it's sand, is really, really hard to do. And the margin for missing at Oakmont was already small. Then it got even smaller. And all of a sudden, it just kind of threw off guys a whole heck of a lot once they knew they couldn't control the ball as well with water on the face or water on the ball. And it became kind of a nightmare out there. And fortunately for J.J. Spaun, he handled that nightmare better than anybody probably could have expected. And he winds up being the U.S. Open champion after shooting 40 on the front nine.
I know there's a lot of variations and a lot of areas of gray when I ask this question, but are we talking about a J.J. Spaun? And I know he was runner-up at the Players, and that was all great. But are we talking about a guy that's more likely Lucas Glover, U.S. Open winner, or are we talking more about a guy that actually could win more than Lucas Glover did after winning the U.S. Open? I mean, what is J.J. Spaun?
I mean, just playing the percentages, he's more likely Lucas Glover, right? I mean, there aren't that many multiple-time major champions in the history of golf, less than 100 of them. So it's just the percentages, right? That said, I feel like Spawn's a really interesting case of a guy who is in the process of discovering just how good he can be. And there are some guys who are one-time, one-and-done major champions who knew all along they could do it. They just didn't know how. And they kind of reached their top of the mountain, and then they quickly came back to the base, and they never stayed there ever again. I think J.J. Spawn's an interesting case in the opposite, in that he was climbing the entire time not knowing where the peak was. And he had a really interesting quote when he had won and when he was speaking with Mike Tirico saying, I didn't know what my ceiling was. And I think that's a really interesting insight into what he has done in the last really year, to go from a guy who for many years struggled to keep his PGA Tour card, finally won an event in 2022. Then a couple of years later was 100th basically in FedEx Cup points. And then this year gets out the gate great. Yeah, he fell apart in the playoff at the Players. That's fine. And then he realizes, hey, I could keep doing this. I could be more than just a guy who is an afterthought at the fifth major playoff. And I wonder what that will do for him, because I think he's realizing his dream on the upswing, not the downswing. And I think that makes him a more interesting character.
In the final few minutes here, let's talk about the struggle that this course was, the struggle bus that was Oakmont. Was it a fair setup when you look at these scores, ultimately where some of the best golfers in the world were? And I know it's supposed to be the toughest test. Was this a fair setup?
I think so. I mean, they can't stop the weather, right? So let's take the last 90 minutes,
of course,
2 hours, 3 hours, put that to the side. There's really nothing they could do about that unless they wanted to avoid a Monday finish. So you can gripe with that. I would be fine with that. But I think Oakmont in the main for the 60 to 63 holes, whatever it was, that the leaders got to play before it kind of turned one Sunday afternoon, I think was eminently fair. It's a really difficult golf course. 5.5-inch rough kind of takes away some of the skill of the game, but it also, in a way, democratizes it, because when you have 2-inch rough or 3-inch rough, the best players in the world can hit it 330 yards. They can hit a wedge out of there. They can hit it to the green, and they still have an enormous advantage. If you hit the rough from 330 yards out or 285 yards out, and it's so deep that all you can do is put a wedge on it, that kind of mitigates that advantage. That's how someone like J.J. Spaun, who doesn't quite hit it as far, gets a benefit when he puts in the fairway, right? I think that the greens and the putting surfaces are always a point of contention when Oakmont hosts, because they have a reputation as a club that they could host a U.S. Open tomorrow and no one would know the difference if they needed to in a pinch. I think that's still true, and I think that's a point of pride for them. And you just kind of have to accept going into an Oakmont U.S. Open, I will say also next year at Shinnecock, that it's going to be really hard. The winning score is going to be darn near par, and there are going to be a whole lot of people who will not have a chance before they even step on the first tee because they psych themselves out.
Did Sam Burns get screwed? That terrible lie where he called over for an official not once but twice. Did Burns get screwed on that call?
Technically in the rules, no, because his stance didn't squish up water in the way that it typically would deem a relief from what's called casual water or squishing up water. So technically, that's correct. The ruling was right based on the official's interpretation of it. However, I think given the spirit of the rule, maybe the wording of it needs to change a little bit, because I think any recreational player who knows about casual water and encountered that situation yesterday would have all agreed to move the ball and give free relief to Sam Burns if they were just playing a $5 Nassau.
Yeah, I thought so too. Real quick, in one answer, will Wyndham Clark be fined or suspended by the PGA Tour?
If so, very quietly.
That's the only way they do it.
That the tour likes to sweep these kinds of things under the rug sometimes, but maybe we'll get a Apple Notes apology from Wyndham this week.
Ryan Valentine, Golf News Net. Always appreciate you, my friend.
Thanks, Jason.
Coming up in 10 minutes, some odds and ends. We're not going to neglect NASCAR today, especially when they have their first Cup Series race outside the U.S., first points Cup Series race. Brian Twining, our friend from Bleacher Nation, is here to talk about what took place in Mexico City. Shane Van Gisbergen, your winner, the road course warrior, gets the win in Mexico City, much to the chagrin of Daniel Suarez fans everywhere. And Brian, the Van Gisbergen thing drives me nuts. And I've had this conversation with other NASCAR people before, because he's a road course specialist, and now he's in the playoffs where he has no chance to win the end of the year championship because he's Shane Van Gisbergen, and all he does is win road races. It's just a point. I have to get it off my chest. I can't stand the fact that you've got, a road course ringer who's in there who winds up winning. I don't like it. Just saying.
Au contraire, my friend. This was the exact scenario that popped up into my head before the season started, in that Shane is so good at road courses. He's likely to compile 2-3 wins at these tracks, put him into a good enough points standing to get past the first round of the playoffs, where we have another road course in the Charlotte Roval. So a spot in the round of 8 is within the realm of possibility for SVG. And with him improving and just getting decent runs on ovals, it's possible for him.
Shane, I called you Shane. Brian, you are a smart man. You are not taking your hard-earned money and putting it on Shane Van Gisbergen to be the champion at the end of the year. You're not.
Oh, well, at the right price, I did. I took it. It was like 150 to 1 before the season started. A little bit before the race yesterday, I think it was at like 300 at places. And then going back to the point of whether or not he should or shouldn't be into the playoffs, when you're able to put a spanking on the Cup Series like he did, I think he more than deserves his shot and his flowers in the Cup Series playoffs, because you won't even see Kyle Larson beating the rest of the field on an oval by 16 and a half seconds.
And he did win by a lot, besting Christopher Bell, who finished second. And it was basically Shane Van Gisbergen's race. He led for 60 laps, and he does get the win. What stood out to you from this event in Mexico City?
I thought it was fantastic. I mean, the racing was typical road course racing. It was hard to pass, but there was a lot of battles going on throughout the field. And, we had the rain situation. We had guys on multiple differing tire strategies, as you saw Austin Cindric not pit until midway through stage 2. I mean, look, people can complain Shane just destroyed the field, made it boring like an F1 race, like a 2024 Max Verstappen victory, but how impressive that was, along with the differing tire strategies, I thought made it really fun. I hope they go back next year. I will try to attend it next year, as living in Southern California, I'm very familiar with the culture. So I would love to go down there.
Carson Hocevar didn't seem like he was as big a fan of this race as some people though. I mean, really? I just wonder how the drivers as a whole felt about going down there. There were obviously the travel issues that we've read so much about. what was it? Shane Van Gisbergen was sleeping on the floor of his trailer. I mean, NASCAR's got to clean this thing up.
Well, I mean, Montezuma's revenge is a real thing when you go south of the border. Believe me. Again, growing up in Southern California, you were always warned. Every time you went across the border, you better be careful about what you're eating and drinking. But, there was a lot of differing opinions as to how much people enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it. But I think as a whole, getting to expose another country to this sport and seeing the reception that they brought there, the hordes of people surrounding drivers as they were entering the track, asking for autographs. Like, this is how you grow a business.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. By the way, for people who aren't following along, check out Shane Van Gisbergen's comments after the race, talking about some of the intestinal issues, I guess we could say, that he was experiencing. Guys that performed well outside of Shane Van Gisbergen, because we do still have a points race here, and guys that are trying to claw their way into the playoffs potentially via points. What else stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, Chase Elliott, once again, showing up really late in the race, looking like he had a speed that could have contended for the win had he had better track position. John Hunter Nemechek finishing 6th. Like, where did that come from? And then also Cole Custer with a top 10. Just crazy stuff as we head into the last race of the seeding for the tournament, the in-season tournament, and we get about 9 or 8 races for the rest of the regular season.
And Bubba Wallace, just continues to add up points.
Correct.
Finishing in 12th, and again, just continues that march potentially towards the playoffs via points without winning a race.
Yeah, I mean, he sits 10th in the standings right now. He's in a great spot. This is something that they haven't done in the past, where they've always been gung-ho about checkers or wreckers. We need a win to get into the playoffs, and this year they've kind of changed their strategy, and it's proving to be the correct call.
As you look ahead to Pocono, what stands out to you?
Denny Hamlin making his return. I mean, missing this race was kind of the best decision for him. He probably would have finished in the same spot that Ryan Truex did, maybe even worse. Who knows? But kudos to him for putting his family first. And then we go to Pocono, where he's 1A amongst all of the good drivers there.
Reason to be concerned about Kyle Larson right now?
No, I don't think. I mean, I feel like this is typical for Hendrick. We hit on this a couple of weeks ago. Like, Hendrick always, as the summer comes along, they tend to go into hibernation until the races really matter ahead of the playoffs. And I don't know, Larson's still going to be there. Okay,
good stuff. Brian Twining, check him out. Bleacher Nation, talking all things NASCAR, hangs out with us on Mondays on the show to recap the race. Don't drink the water down there south of the border, ladies and gentlemen, as Shane Van Gisbergen found out. Thank you, my friend. We'll talk to you next week.
Yep, take it easy. Don't forget, Carson Hocevar winning at Pocono.
All right, just about time to put the wraps on this baby for a Monday. Tomorrow we'll have a recap of game number 5 of the NBA Finals. Dennis Bernstein will probably hang out with us, talk some hockey as well with the Stanley Cup Final. Going to game 6, the Panthers up 3-2 in that series. A couple of reminders before we go. If you have not done so yet, make sure to subscribe to the Sports Wrap with Jason Page podcast, available on all your favorite podcasting platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, and more. You can also watch the show, aside from all the affiliates we're on across the country and Canada. You can also watch this show every day on Spotify, as well as on YouTube. On YouTube, you could actually do so through our Sports Wrap with Jason Page YouTube channel. If you have not done so yet, make sure to subscribe. It is free. Sports Wrap shorts are returning this week with me being back from vacation. It was a working vacation, but vacation nonetheless. Sports Wrap shorts will return this week. Anytime there's breaking news, we've got it covered on our Sports Wrap with Jason Page YouTube channel. And without any further delays, ladies and gentlemen, time for some odds and ends. Odds and ends, Sam Yarnell. Not the end, but the beginning of Shohei Ohtani's return to pitching. Expected to throw an inning or 2 tonight against the Padres. as an opener. It was thought he wasn't going to come back until after the All-Star break. Well, not so fast, Lee Harvey. He's coming back now. What do you make of the Dodgers' decision to throw Shohei Ohtani back into the fire?
Yeah, I mean, they kind of have to. They're at a spot. I mean, we've been talking about this for months, Jason. The Dodgers are the most injured team in baseball. They're at a spot where it's kind of getting to an all-hands-on-deck point, especially where they're, like, not even leading the division comfortably. In a great division, nevertheless, not to downplay the strength of the NL West, probably the best division in baseball right now. They need Shohei Ohtani to pitch, and unfortunately, they kind of need him to pitch well.
Bricklayer Barbie gets her first triple-double. Hats off to Angel Reese. She gets her first triple-double. Congratulations. Hey, look, if we're going to knock her for all the bricks and the fact that she can't make a shot from 3 feet away, and boy, she's leaning into it now. She's putting these TikTok videos out there saying, you all don't understand. You don't get ball. She throws up a triple-double, albeit against the Connecticut Sun, which is like clubbing baby seals these days, because the Sun are kind of a mess right now as they tank that franchise in the hopes of probably taking it to Boston at some point. I mean, hats off to Angel Reese. If we're going to knock her for playing poorly, and God knows there's enough opportunities to do that, we got to tip our hat when she gets a triple-double. Of course, she does it on the same weekend where Caitlin Clark is the real story again. 32 points in a win. Liberty lose for the first time because of the fever. The game did a huge TV number, but I haven't been able to confirm what that number is. There seems to be a lot of back and forth in terms of how many people were watching. But go ahead on Angel Reese.
11 points on 2 of 7 shooting.
Yes.
2 of 7.
Me bounds, man.
2 behind the 3-point line.
Getting those me bounds. Me bounds.
Do the math. That's 2 2-point field goals for Angel Reese and 7 free throws.
Meanwhile, you had Caitlin Clark shooting logo threes left and right.
I'm going to say it doesn't count as a triple-double.
Oh, come on.
I'm going to say it doesn't count as a triple-double.
It has to
you
count.
got to make more than 2 field goals. You got to make at least 3 field goals for it to be a triple-double. You have to make at least 3 2-point field goals. Angel Reese didn't do that. Not a triple-double. Didn't make 3 2-point field goals. Triple-double. I mean, I know ball
Sam's
as well as Angel
it.
Reese now, right? Triple-double.
Yeah, Sam's not counting it. All right, fair enough. You know what did count? My first pitch again at Duncan Park in Hartford, Connecticut. We showed it briefly on Friday's show, but Sam, for you and the audience tuning in on a Monday, here it is. It's my first pitch for the Hartford Yard Goats. It did reach home plate. They did not let me throw from the rubber. I would have liked to have, but they made it clear to us. The Yard Goat said you're not going to be able to throw from the rubber. We even had the page cam set up where you could look at it through my point of view. Thank you to the Yard Goats. Thanks to the fans in Hartford for making me feel so welcome. It was a great time. Sam, what'd you make of the first pitch?
It was a great pitch, Jason. I mean,
Wow.
You did say it yourself. You short-armed it a little bit. But
I was terrified.
I wonder what it would have been like. Because we were talking, for so many weeks about whether or not you were going to go out to the rubber. Now I just wonder what the result would have been like from 60 feet, 6 inches.
Well, if I short-armed it like that, it would have been like a 52-footer. I mean, it was not my best work. And let me tell you, as much as we like to make fun of Stephen A. Smith, 50 Cent, Jordan Love, who we've talked about recently on the show. Jordan Love. If you have not seen Jordan Love's first pitch for the Brewers, it was terrible. Go and get a look at it if you can. But for all of that, I have to say, now having done one of these in front of like 7,000 people in a packed stadium and people are actually watching when you do it, I was terrified, Sam. I was absolutely terrified. I won't make fun of bad first pitches.
I totally understand why that was terrifying. Yeah. Definitely better than Jordan Love.
Yeah.
Just saw the video. Definitely better than Jordan Love.
Thank you. It's the only time in my life I'll be better than Jordan Love at anything. So I got to take it. That's going to do it for us. Thanks, Brian Twining, Ryan Ballingy, you, Sam. We'll see you all back here on Tuesday.